Today on Locked On Red Wings, Detroit has a quiet first day of free agency. Is a slide back imminent? Is there more coming? Or do the kids have to save us?
You're Locked On Red Wings, your daily podcast on the Detroit Red Wings. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back to the Locked On Red Wings podcast. We are your hosts, Brian Fischer and Scotty Bentley. I'm a former broadcast producer for 97 Won the Ticket, where Scotty is the host over at Locked On Tigers, as well as a freelance journalist for the Detroit News. And today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. As playoffs wind down, or have wound down at this point, the sport stops sporting like we want them to, but this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right, there's something for everyone, every day, all summer long. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon today to get started. Scotty, what a whiplash of emotions. Last night we record late, we record the episode at like 11 o'clock at night. They re-signed Patrick Kane, a big splash heading into free agency. Basically, borderline a free agent move of its own, considering how late it came to free agency on its own. And we were thinking, okay, Red Wings are gearing up to make big splash come free agency and come July 1st. And then July 1st comes and they make, 6, 7 signings, but they're all kind of meh. Nothing really moves the needle, and I'll break it down real fast. I'll just read you off the names of the guys they signed and the contracts, and then we'll get into the discussion, because I feel like today's show is more rationalizing what has happened or what has not happened, rather than talking about the individual impact of a lot of these players, because I don't know if there is a lot of individual impact by most of these players. So first and foremost, Red Wings signed Cam Talbot to a 2-year, $2.5 million deal. Cam Talbot is going to be 37 on Friday, and this is a goal that we mentioned back on our free agency primer with the Detroit Red Wings. He had a .913 save percentage, playing 54 games with the LA Kings, and was a 15 goals saved above expected. He had 15 goals saved above expected with an LA Kings team that faced the fourth fewest shots at 5-on-5. So a good defensive team in the LA Kings, but Cam Talbot still elevated them throughout most of the season until the April happened and he kind of fell apart.
Yeah, the postseason was not good.
But that was in LA. That was not just Cam Talbot. That was the entire team. Nobody particularly had a good April or postseason. They then sign William Legason. Legason, I think it is, to a 1-year, $775,000 contract. I believe that is league minimum. It is a 1-year contract, but I look at the fact he played 40 games last year. He's never played a full NHL season. It screams AHL player. It screams Grand Rapids depth. It screams a call-up player. He's a defenseman. Then they sign Erik Gustafsson, probably the second of the 3 that's going to impact the Red Wings at the everyday NHL level. He is a left shooting defenseman to a 2-year, $2 million deal. He had 31 points in 76 games with the New York Rangers. When we talk about players a little bit later, though, he and Talbot are probably the two we'll talk about the most in terms of impact for the Detroit Red Wings. And, of course, after that, it's Sheldon Dries to a 2-year, 2-way contract. The league minimum at the NHL level, less so at the AHL level. He's always pretty much exclusively been an AHL player. More Grand Rapids depth. I'm trying to think. Jack Campbell, they signed. That was a big shock. Jack Campbell to a 1-year league minimum contract. That also screams Grand Rapids depth because they have four goalies now. So, the Red Wings made, and of course, I can't forget, they re-signed Christian Fischer, the dog. 1 year, $1.125 million. The same contract he was on with the Red Wings last season. We know Christian Fischer, not a lot to break down there. We're happy to have him return. He became kind of a bottom 6, an integral part of that bottom 6 and a shutdown line. Can play penalty kill. I know he wasn't their number 1 option, but he can play penalty kill for the Detroit Red Wings. Scotty, with all that being said, what is your initial thought on how the Red Wings' first day of free agency played out?
Man, I think it's a really I don't want to say fine line because I really don't think it is. It's pretty clear in my head um, that this when we talk a little bit more about the individual players later on in the show and talk about maybe their roles on the team, the NHL players, as Brian already you already laid out there, kind of who is likely to start in the AHL. So we can kind of talk about that, and when we talk about them, I will likely say that I like the signings, right? Like I because I do. I like the moves that they did make. I have zero issue with any of the additions that this team made today, yesterday, as the listeners are tuning in here. But the it is I think pretty close to objective, right? I don't want to speak for everybody. Kind of let down or disappointment of a free agency though, and I don't think anyone expected the market to be done. So the free agency was pretty much over in an hour. But it was one of those things where I like the moves we made. I think that we got better in between the margins. We did a lot of moves. The Wings did a lot of moves that um, improved certain areas of the team. They addressed depth a lot, which is always a good thing. Something that I preach a lot, and that I am glad that they did at the NHL level. Obviously, they did at the AHL level as well. But did the ceiling of this team get any better? Did the best case scenario for this team get any better based on the moves they made today? No, right? And the way that the Wings would have to take a step forward now, this upcoming season, would be Raymond and Seider take more steps forward. Kane obviously stays healthy. Larkin stays healthy. Whatever. You could say that about anybody, though. Assuming health, it's the young players take a big step forward. It's Raymond and Seider take a big step. And then it's all of the youth that we've been talking about for a very long time and been talking about where they fit into the piece of this team long term is going to have to be solid, as a lot of them are rookies. And that's not exactly, I don't think, the poster child for like this is going to go really well. And I'm not saying it's going to be a disaster. Certainly, I'm not saying that they just lost 20 points on the day or anything like that. But when you're in that key spot where you're looking for a place to step forward, I think just relying on players that you already have to just be better is not necessarily a guaranteed, seal of approval to do so, and from the fan base.
Right. And I agree with you in principle. This was an underwhelming first day of free agency, and most of your marquee free agents were gone before noon even hit. Like
Right.
noon was just there to make a formality, make things official. Stamkos was already gone before noon even hit, and there's a lot to break down with my feelings on this, because on one hand, it is really disheartening to see the Red Wings whiff on big name players like Steven Stamkos that they were connected to last night, right? Red Wings were one of the players that had their hands in the pot. That was Steven Stamkos, but they just, obviously we don't know what happened, but they did not beat out the contract offer that Nashville got. Nashville offered them. Nashville went all in today. It was kind of insane. But at the same time, right, you look around the league and the contracts that are handed out, and this is kind of a consequence of the fact that so many of the higher caliber free agents were signed before free agency even began, that artificially inflates the value of a lot of the middling players as well. So Steve Yzerman didn't address this team's biggest needs. They got better on the margins, as you put it. But at the same time, he avoided giving out ugly contracts, right? We lament some of the, we're a little bit more forgiving to some of the contracts, some of them, not all, that Yzerman has given out to some of these players because of the fact that free agency you often overpay. But a lot of fans lament Andrew Kopp, and they lament Ben Sherratt. I know we've softened on Ben Sherratt because he had a better second year. But those same caliber of players were getting 6 and 7 year deals this offseason. So it's really frustrating, and I get it. It was an underwhelming first day of free agency, and I wish he would have gotten the higher caliber players to solve our biggest needs. But at the same time, it's really frustrating to hear Red Wings fans lament the fact that we have these contracts on the books and at the same time ask the Red Wings to then sign a same caliber or similar caliber of player to an even worse contract this offseason. And it's like you having your cake and eat it too, but at the same time as that, also complain about the fact that we signed veterans to block the youth from being able to play. Like, what do we want right now? Like, you and I have a clear idea of what we want the Red Wings to do, and they did not do that. But it just feels like I'm hearing 30 different things at every single time that Red Wings the youth can't play if you have 30 veterans on the team. 30 veterans can't play if you have 6 or 7 youth players on the team. I know that math doesn't work out, but you understand the point I'm trying to get across. Like, it's a balance of two, and they need to strike that balance. And
is this balance? Was this balancing that?
It's not then that's where I come in, where it doesn't address the biggest needs. Right. But you see, it's just when I see these contracts being handed out, I'm like, okay, I'm kind of glad that's not what we did. But at the same time, they needed to get 1 or 2 guys, right? And I guess we'll talk about we talk about the margins they improved upon, right? With Cam Talbot and Gustafsson, notably, and Christian Fischer, right? In segment 2, and then where they clearly did not address big needs. So I guess stay tuned for that. I know I'm kind of contradicting myself, but like that's what I mean when I said my thoughts are kind of all over the place with the lack of moves the Red Wings did to really address their needs, but at the same time possibly set up for a youth movement that we've also been craving for so long. So it's a complicated day, and I just, please stay with us as we navigate our emotions. Mainly me.
Title of this show is going to be At the Same Time.
Right. I'll talk to you guys today about FanDuel. I love sports, and I love them so much I never want to stop. But playoffs are over. The Panthers are Stanley Cup champions, and all you got now is boring old baseball. Those Tigers, man. Yeesh. I didn't even play today, and they can't even escape the heat that I give them. And the sports aren't sporting like we want them to, but FanDuel lets me keep the sports going whenever I want. All I have to do is open the app and dream up bets anytime I'm in the mood. And this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with boosts or bonus daily. That's right, there's something for everyone, every day, all summer long. So head over to FanDuel.com/lockedon and start making the most out of your summer. FanDuel, official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball. All right, segment 2, Locked On Red Wings podcast. Scotty, before we talk about what the Red Wings did not address, let's briefly talk about where the Red Wings did improve and the signings they did make. Because you're right, I like the signings they did make. I just don't love them.
Yeah, I like them. These are all moves that if they're your third or fourth biggest move of the offseason, you go, awesome. That's all. Like I really like them. Honestly, I think they're really good fits. I have no issue with the moves that they did make. It's just that I wanted them to make more.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Cam Talbot, let's start there, right? And I briefly touched on it. This is an upgrade in net. It's a marginal upgrade, if I'm being honest, because how do I put this? He had a 913 save percentage in 54 games played. That's really impressive. That's an impressive workload. But I'm a little wary of that number being able to be maintained, considering he turns 37 on Friday, and the LA Kings faced the fourth fewest shots at 5-on-5 in any team in the NHL this last season. So he faced a light workload, but was good in it. 15 goals saved above expected. I am hopeful in one circumstance that he'll be better than Husso and Lyon, or more consistent than Husso, Lyon, and Reimer, but I'm also wary of him being able to maintain this level of play as he continues to age behind a worse defensive team in the Detroit Red Wings. So that is a little bit of a concern. I'm happy with the signing because he does make the goaltending better, but again, it doesn't really move the needle for me all too much. I'm happy with it, but I'm not in love with it, I guess is the best way to put it. like
Yeah,
I
yeah.
said, started at the end of the beginning of this segment.
Right. This is one where when you look at the best case scenario for this, it's he has another, 9, 10-ish save percentage and plays in 50 to 55 games again, right? Like that would obviously be best case scenario. But for me, this is a really high floor move. Like worst case scenario, you still have a better backup than like you were rolling out last year for most of the year, right? Husso had a really poor year and then obviously got hurt, and Reimer was a complete roller coaster of emotions. We were winning, but he wasn't very good. So I think that at a minimum, you are getting an improvement, right? Even if he does take a big step back and he's not nearly as good as he was this past year, you still improved your backup goalie situation. Now, the issue with that is there's no guarantee that you improved your starting goalie situation, and you're rolling in now with Husso, with Talbot, and with Lyon, and there's no guarantee that any of those three guys are like a legitimate 55 game a year, 9.5 to 9.10 save percentage goalie. There isn't. There is no guarantee that any goalie on your roster right now is a legitimate, playoff caliber starting goaltender. But again, at worst, you improved your goalie depth and you improved the backup situation. So for $2.5 million over 2 years or whatever it is, like I'm totally fine with that.
Yeah, and I mean, if you're looking for areas to reassure you,
microcosm of the whole free agency. I didn't mean to cut you off, sorry, but like that's really a microcosm of all the free agency. It's like, okay, like you improved, the depth a little bit. Like I'm fine with this, but you didn't improve the ceiling. You didn't raise the ceiling. You didn't make any positional group, the high end of any of that any better. And that's, kind of what my opinion of this in a vacuum as well.
Yeah, and I mentioned why I'm wary, but I mean, reasons to be a little bit more optimistic about Cam Talbot is throughout most of his career, he's been pretty solid, right? A lot of seasons. I mean, he back-to-back seasons in Minnesota, 915, 911 save percentage. He went to Ottawa, and this is another moment to be wary. Bad defensive team. He didn't look that great. LA Kings, good defensive team, 913 save percentage. He had a couple good seasons with the New York Rangers, 941 save percentage, 926. Edmonton Oilers, he was pretty solid all the way up until his final year. So he has a track record of consistency, and he played in 54 games. That's not nothing. That's quite quite a lot of hockey games, and he finally got burnt out at the very end. So like it's like you said, it could go either way, and I want to believe it's going to go the way we want it to go, but we've been burned on goalies several times before. I'm coming off as so negative.
His AAV is $2.5 million, man.
Right.
Like, there's a reason there clearly wasn't much of a market for him, despite having a 913.
Right. The next guy we want to talk about, Erik Gustafsson. I guess it's probably Gustafsson. From the New York Rangers, or was formerly of the New York Rangers, had 31 points in 76 games played. He was an effective, sheltered third-pair defenseman who is capable of playing power play minutes. This is a Gustafsson replacement. He is an offensive D-man, but the difference here is he has less offensive output. Granted, with the New York Rangers, he wasn't getting power play 1 minutes, but also he is more effective in his own end than Shane Gustafsson was. I like this signing, 2 years, $2 million. He's going to give you an option on power play 2, I believe, because I think Moritz Seider is going to take over power play 1, and I think he's an upgrade at the third pair, which, needed an upgrade.
Yeah, no, I like this one a lot, actually. This if I had to have a favorite move, all
right. There's not a lot to choose from.
Put in a corner and was asked to, give me a favorite move. I guess it would be this one. I do like this a lot, though. I really echo a lot of your sentiments. This is an offensive-minded defenseman that can give you special teams, but also is not a complete liability in his own zone, which is what Ghost was, albeit with more offensive production than he will likely provide. So, a little bit of give and take there. But we're assuming we're going to pay Seider. I think that's a conversation to have in segment 3, how that affected this whole thing. But, your Seider is going to be your big name and highest paid defenseman here, hopefully pretty soon. I'd imagine the assumption is that he's going to slide over and take over power play 1. So I really have. I like this move a lot. I think it's a really good fit, and I think it makes your third pair better all around.
Yes, I agree. I agree. I'm not going to talk in a circle. I agree. Let's end it there. Christian Fischer, the other notable extension, 1-year extension. There's not a lot to talk about with that. If you're a Red Wings fan, you know Christian Fischer. You love Christian Fischer. Bottom six forward, integral part of that bottom six. Hard forechecking forward, never gives up on a play. He was an integral part of that shutdown line that the Red Wings were rolling out for big parts of the season until they became less effective. Then they broke it up, and then they got it back together. He can play penalty kill. He's not a main member of the penalty kill, but he can definitely do it. That is really all there is to Christian Fischer because you already know him. The rest of the players, like we said, Jack Campbell, Sheldon Dries, William Legason, they're all AHL Grand Rapids depth. They're maybe an option to be called up, Legason and Campbell specifically, if injuries occur. But if you want a silver lining to those signings, one, Grand Rapids lost a lot of players this offseason, so they had to restock. And two, if you want to that silver lining I keep talking about, this could be preparation for the youth to possibly step in, and that's where we're going to go in segment 3, on top of getting areas they did not address that we did not have time for in this segment. So stay tuned to segment 3 of Locked On Red Wings. Segment 3, Locked On Red Wings podcast. Scotty, before we get into the youth movement aspect of our copium, what is your areas of the free agency that did not get addressed? And if you're a Locked On Red Wings listener, this is going to sound very familiar to you.
Yeah, man. Everything we wanted addressed. Is that being too negative? Pretty much everything we wanted addressed. I think I was very vocal about goaltending. They did address goaltending, but they more addressed, as I said earlier, the depth of goaltending. It's still going to be really up to Husso and or Lyon, I think, to carry a lot of the water there. But I think the biggest thing that went unaddressed was adding a legitimate top 6 forward. Obviously, the Kane re-signing is a big deal, and that's a guy who's really good at hockey and is certainly was going to be someone you missed and you felt if he did not come back. That's a lot of your offense that would have been walking out the door. So it's glad they kept them. But when you're comparing last year's team to this upcoming year's team, Patrick Kane was on both. So that doesn't move the needle. That doesn't make the needle move back. It doesn't make you take a big step back, but it doesn't move the needle forward. Bringing Patrick Kane back as a year older. So I think that the very clear answer to this question is a legitimate top 6 forward, but you can really go down the line. Again, top end goaltending not addressed. Wasn't a guarantee that was ever addressed. That's maybe me being a little stingy, but wasn't. Top 6 forward wasn't. Any blue line help whatsoever to speak of, really, in any capacity outside of, again, Gustafsson. That there you go. That's everything. Is kind of the if I'm going to be a jerk about it, you can really kind of go down the list.
Well, and that's what I mean when we both, I guess that's what we both mean when we say they got better on the margins, right? Because Cam Talbot is marginally better than the goaltending that we already have. I know his numbers look impressive, but again, there's reasons to be a little wary. Gustafsson is marginally better, makes the defensive core marginally better because he's going to make the third pair better. But the areas of the biggest concern and the areas that have the most impact are your top 6 and your top 2 pairs of defense. Those are the guys who eat the most minutes, and those did not get addressed. We were saying all offseason long they need another top 6 winger, especially because David Perron was going to walk. And I'm okay with David Perron walking, just as I'm okay with Gostisbehere walking.
Yeah, I have zero issue with not re-signing David Perron.
2 years at $4 million for a guy who took bad, and I love David Perron. He was a power play specialist. He's really good at possessing the puck, but he took bad penalties, and his footwork was really declining, as was his 5-on-5 scoring.
Man, yeah.
Yeah. He was his 5-on-5 scoring was deteriorating. He wasn't a top 6 forward anymore, so I wanted to upgrade at that position. Just as we're Jeff Petrie. Well, I'm at least a Jeff Petrie defender. I don't want to speak for you in that I still think he can be an effective defenseman on the third pair. Well, as it stands right now, your second pair right side D-man is still Jeff Petrie. And I know there's the Jacob Trouba rumors, and yes, that would be an upgrade over Jeff Petrie. But Matt Roy, and I know, and I talked in segment 1 about I'm happy that Yzerman didn't bite on some of these ridiculous contracts that got signed. A lot of 6 and 7 year, and 7 years is the max length you can sign. A lot of max length contracts getting signed for guys who like are middle of the pack players. But Matt Roy is one where I actually look at that and I'm like, I actually would have been okay with that. I think he's just turning 30 this year. He's making less than $6 million for the next 7 years. That's a fair number. That's actually a good number for him now because a lot of projections had him making $6 million. He's making less than $6 million. And at the second half of that contract, as his play begins to decline, the cap is going to rise and make that cap hit not even look that bad. So that's the one where I'm like, I wish we would have fought a little bit harder for that guy, but then you'd have to outbid the team that he went to, which would have meant you probably would have paid like $6 million across 7 years. I'm rambling at this point. The point being is they tried. I believe Yzerman tried because all indications prove that he was loading up cap space to try and swing and make this team impactfully better in those areas. But so far, he has whiffed at all those opportunities, and getting better on the margins is not enough to propel this team forward. And I don't know if it's enough to not make this team worse also. And that's where the youth conversation comes in, right? We talked about all the signings he made for Grand Rapids, and I think that could be setting up the opportunity. And Yzerman said he's not going to give those players a spot. But right now, after day 1 of free agency, barring any trades he could make...
Who else are you going to play there, brother?
Who else are you going to play there? Like, you still only have 10 forwards actually 8 forwards under contract, but Veleno and Raymond are going to get contracts. So it's like, okay, you're going to pencil in Carter Mazur and Marco Kasper, which I want to do. Albert Johansson, Jonathan Berggren, they're going to be at the NHL. Simon Edvinsson going to be at the NHL. And I do think that they are improvements. I think Simon Edvinsson is a definite improvement on the second pair, which is why I didn't say we need a second pair defenseman. I already penciled Simon Edvinsson into that spot. That makes that spot better. I fully believe that. I think Carter Mazur was going to slide in and immediately make the bottom 6 better. I wasn't sure Marco Kasper was going to make the team because they want him in a top 6 role and playing meaningful minutes, and I wasn't sure he was going to be ready for that. And I'm still not sure he's going to be ready for that, which is why I wanted another top 6 forward in this upcoming free agency. So can the youth movement step in and provide this spark? Because that was the big thing that I kept saying. A slide back with a youth movement is very possible, but it's on Steve Yzerman to keep the balance of good vets and the youth even to make sure that that doesn't happen. And right now, I can't confidently say that they're not going to take a slide back if the youth does come.
Yeah, you're relying heavily on your youth at this point, like very heavily. And we still have, this is day 1, right? Like there's still a lot of like trade possibilities and whatnot going forward. We'll see how the rest of the offseason shakes out, right? Like Cat was way after free agency last year. We have time still to make improvements. This isn't just like guaranteed. This is the team on opening night. But as it stands right now, today, you are heavily reliant on your young players who have little to no NHL experience, right? Like outside of Berger, like everybody else has little to no experience at this level, and you're going to have to rely on them heavily. And that's the situation you're in, right? Like that's it. You are now in a position where those guys have to be as good, if not better, than expected. And most, if not all of them, are going to be rookies. Like that is, and this was my point, right? Like if you think back to, I don't know, a year ago when you and I had this conversation, and we started talking about, like how much room was there going to be on the roster for certain players. And like Edvinsson is blocked now because they signed a couple of defensemen last year and they had, 7 or 8 defensemen ahead of Edvinsson. Like this was my entire point of pushing back to you at that point, again, 12, 13 months ago, whenever we had this conversation, was to prevent this. Right? If you don't improve depth, if you don't make those signings, if you don't put people in front of your youth, then you're going to be left with just putting all of your cookies in one jar. And it's just like it either works or it doesn't. It either stays afloat or it doesn't. And that sets you up interestingly for next offseason, right? That puts you in a spot where you're like, okay, we kind of know who we like. We have some more players coming off the books. We'll have some cap to work with, etc. And you can, give yourself a little bit of flexibility next year. And that's great. But I'm not sure how many people really want to hear about next year when we're still a day into free agency this year. And like the fact of the matter is, you had an opportunity to walk that line and do both. You had an opportunity to not just throw all of your youth into the fire and just be like, well, it's up to y'all now, right? It's up to all of you guys that are coming up to be able to do this. You had an opportunity to prevent that and just completely whiffed on everybody. And like, I'm not saying this is going to be like a disaster and like the team took a step back, like 3 years back or anything. They still have almost all of the players that made them a really solid team this season and right on the fringe of the postseason. But you are now, the ceiling of this team is going to be determined by a bunch of rookies. Because besides that, the only way that you can improve your team outside of them is Raymond, Seider, and Larkin, I guess, taking like more steps forward. Like that those are your only 2 paths to the team improving dramatically, is going to be those 3 taking steps forward or your now soon to be rookies being really solid NHL players off rip. And that's I think a really, I don't know if not fair is the way to put it, but that's a lot of weight to put on the shoulders of kids who have never played in the league before.
Yeah, and I think there is reasons to be optimistic when you think about certain angles of this, right? Like Patrick Kane, he's going to have a full season to train like an athlete. And Chris Johnson, NHL Insider, believes that he's going to hit almost every single one of those incentives because a full season of playing with an athlete, we're going to get, I mean, maybe not prime Patrick Kane. I said on yesterday's episode, I think it'd be unfair to expect him to have 100 points and 40 goals, but a point-per-game player throughout the entire season, and that's going to add scoring that obviously they got 47 points in 50 games, but now I'm talking extra 30 in 82, right? If he can stay healthy. That I know that's a big question mark. And there's still a lot of offseason left, right? Like Steve Yzerman is really known as a trade monster. Like that, Wallman trade notwithstanding, is known for his just being able to fleece people on trades, and he's done it time and time again. And people keep pointing to Alex DeBrincat being traded for on July 10th last year, and that was the Red Wings' biggest offseason acquisition last year. On that, and probably until Patrick Kane got signed in November. So the offseason is not over, and now with a new logjam on the left side and 4 goalies underneath NHL contract, like it's very clear there will have to be moves that need to be made to help flesh out this roster and fill it out. So this isn't the final roster, so there's still time to improve, but the premier, and I say that in air quotes, NHL free agents are gone. And on one hand, I'm really happy he didn't hand out 6 and 7 year deals to some of these players, because I think some of these deals are going to look really bad next year or the year after. And some people are already giving Yzerman crap for the 5-year contracts and 4-year contracts he was handing out. I think it was wise to not make that same misstep. But at the same time, I kept saying it, they needed to make at least one big signing, and I don't think re-signing Patrick Kane necessarily counts when he was already on your team last year. I needed somebody in addition to that to fill out some big holes, big impact holes. Like, you need that balance. Yes, you need the youth to come up, and we've been bringing that drum, but it can't be just youth that makes the team. You need to have impact off-season acquisitions, and I will withhold complete judgment until we see how this roster shapes up. But as of right now, this is a very underwhelming and disappointing start to free agency. And this is a team that looks like it could step back, barring some unforetold success by some of these rookies, who I'm very high on. I'm very high on a lot of this youth, and I think they'll be very good. But like you said, it's unfair to expect them to come in and set the league on fire in their first year. Like, development continues.
So all of them, it's not happening.
Yeah.
It's not. Like, I can tell you right now, I don't know anything. It's not happening, right? Like, I'm an idiot, and I know that. Like, you one or two of them, sure. I'm talking about, like, 4 rookies. It's not happening, man. Like, 4 rookies are not going to all come up and all be incredible off rip. They might all be solid 4 rookies. They might all have good rookie seasons. They're not going to be, like their peak. They're not going to be in their prime years off rip. It's not happening. So, like, again, I like all of those players too. I am very high on their futures. I want them to be a part of the Detroit Red Wings going forward. But that's big picture. And in the short window of this upcoming season, this has been a huge swing and a miss so far. I think pretty objectively. And
swings and misses happen. They do. But
yeah.
That doesn't mean that
try.
Yeah. But that doesn't mean
clearly he did. You don't trade Wallman for no reason. Like, I feel I'm not trying to say he didn't load up and take some swings, but that, right now they were all misses.
But that doesn't also mean that Red Wings fans have to sit there and think that it's okay that he just tried, right? Like, he's paid to make this team into a contender. And I don't know. I want to withhold final judgment until we see what the roster actually looks like, right? And I do believe that he's going to continue to try and make moves to make this roster better.
This is it, man. Yeah. And maybe I'm going to have pie on my face, and that's just me, like, trying to cope. But I refuse to believe that, like, this was the entire offseason was just going to be re-signing Kane, hopefully re-signing Mo and Raymond. That's another wrinkle to this, right? Like, that I think that certainly, if not a large factor, played somewhat of a factor in kind of how free agency and how the offseason has shaken down. The fact that they aren't re-signed yet. Like, I mean,
I'm not worried about that. They're going to get re-signed. They're just big name RFAs, and that takes time.
No, I'm not saying they're not going to get re-signed. I'm saying not knowing exactly how much money you have.
Yeah.
To play, that certainly is a factor when free agency starts.
But it's just like, okay, outside of trade, like, who's available? Vladimir Tarasenko? Like, that's...
No, it's going to be trade, yeah.
Yeah, I just...
Which, again, he did last year. Like, got a top 6 guy last year. Like, I'm not saying that's impossible, but it's just,
it helps that Alex DeBrincat, like, forced his way here, too. Like, let's not let that get lost, too. Like,
correct.
That team got
took
better.
All of the leverage out of Ottawa's hands, yeah.
Right. Anyways, I mean, that's where we stand. Underwhelming. We like the signings they made. They make the team better on the margin. It leaves opportunity for youth to step into the team, but at the same time, they didn't get an impact signing. And I'm not saying they had to go out there and sign everybody like Nashville did, but they needed 1 or 2 impact signings to make this team better, to complement the youth that you expected to come up. And I guess that's the most concise way of putting it. I think that's where I'm probably the most just disappointed.
Just straight up, is the team better than they were 24 hours ago?
No.
Okay. Well, that ended the conversation. I'm not saying it's a pass-fail grade because we didn't have as bad of a day as Winnipeg. Like, I'm not saying it's just pass.
Did they even do anything?
Yeah, they ended up signing like some 3rd or 4th liner, I want to say. I forget who it was. Anyway, we didn't have the worst day in the NHL. It's not pass-fail, but pretty much all of the free agents are gone. Like, it was such a quick moving market. You're not going to find a lot of, like, hidden, like, oh, nobody saw this, like a 60-point guy just, like, out here, right? Like, the big name free agents are gone. So just in a vacuum, before free agency started yesterday at this time versus right now, is the team better? I would say probably not. And that's yeah, I would call it, I don't know if concerning is the right word, but that's not great. Not the position I'm sure anybody, Yzerman included, wanted to be in.
Yep, absolutely. We're already way over time. and we've rambled too much, so we got to go off into the sunset here. Yzerman is going to talk on Tuesday to people. It's actually sunset. Is going
That's
to
what I
talk
was
to
looking at, actually. That's what I just looked out my window. I was like, oh, it kind of is the sunset.
So Yzerman is going to talk to the media on Tuesday. We'll see what he has to say. Hopefully he tells us that it's all going to be okay. So stay tuned for that tomorrow on Locked On Red Wings. Same time, same place. It's your team every day.